Not all stories have a neat ending. Some just stop. They leave behind a silence that's filled with unanswered questions, grief, and the ghost of what might have been. These are the stories that haunt us the most, not always because of the crime, but because of the chilling realization that sometimes there is no justice. This is one of those stories. It's a story of paradise lost, a flawed investigation that seemed designed to fail, and two young women whose lives were brutally stolen. Their final moments are shrouded in a mystery that Brazil hasn't been able to solve for over 2 decades. This is the story of the Serrambi beach murders. Two young women, full of life, head to a beach party in the paradise of Serrambi, Brazil. 10 days later, their bodies are found, brutally murdered. The investigation that followed was a maze of flawed evidence, powerful suspects, and allegations of a cover-up. More than 20 years later, the question that haunts Brazil is the same. Who really killed Tarsila and Maria Eduarda? To really get what happened, you first have to picture the place. Ipajica, a municipality in the state of Pernambuco, Brazil, is famous for its almost impossibly beautiful beaches. The water is warm and clear. The sky is a brilliant blue, and the coastline is dotted with natural pools and swaying palm trees. One of its jewels is Serrambi, a weekend getaway for the affluent youth of Recife, the state's capital. It was a place to escape, for parties and sun-drenched days that felt a world away from any danger. And it was right here, in this picture-perfect paradise, where two best friends, Maria Eduarda and Tarsila Gusmao, were looking for a weekend of fun and freedom. Both girls were 16 years old, right on the edge of adulthood with their whole lives ahead of them. In many ways, they were a classic study in contrasts. Maria Eduarda, known to her friends as Mana, was exuberant, the life of the party. Her school coordinator described her as deeply sensitive, a girl who could cry easily. She loved to travel and was a regular at Serrambi. The beach felt like a second home. Tarsila was the more reserved of the two. Described as studious and calm, she was a quiet counterpoint to Maria Eduarda's bubbly energy. She had studied classical ballet and lived with her mother, an administrator, after her parents separated. They'd met just 2 years earlier, in 2001, at a shopping mall in Recife, and their bond was instant and strong. Different as they were, they shared that common ground of youth, dreams, secrets, and a friendship that felt unbreakable. Their parents trusted them, even knowing their daughters had an independent streak. The girls were known to be responsible, always letting their parents know where they were. They were good kids from good families, figuring out the exciting and sometimes complicated world of being a teenager in a privileged corner of Brazilian society. In early May 2003, Brazil was celebrating a long Labor Day holiday weekend. For teenagers everywhere, it was a perfect excuse for a getaway. Tarsila and Maria Eduarda were invited to spend the weekend at a friend's beach house in Serrambi. They packed their bags, filled with the kind of excitement that only a 16-year-old on the way to a party weekend can feel. They were heading to paradise, to a house full of friends, with no idea they were walking toward an abyss they would never return from. The weekend started just as you'd expect. The friends got to Serrambi on Friday, May 2nd, 2003. The beach house was buzzing with a group of about 9 young people. They settled in, and the night was filled with easy laughter, music, and drinking, pretty typical for a gathering like this. For Tarsila and Maria Eduarda, it felt like the start of a perfect holiday. The next day, Saturday, May 3rd, the group's plans were loose. The day was beautiful, and someone suggested a boat trip. A smaller part of the group, including Tarsila and Maria Eduarda, decided to take a lancha, a small motorboat, to the neighboring Pano de Maricape, another stunning beach. The guy running the boat gave them a clear warning. Be back at the meeting point by 4 p.m. After that, the tide would make it impossible for the boat to get through, and they'd be stranded, with the warning noted. The group split up to enjoy the afternoon. Tarsila and Maria Eduarda wandered along the beach, soaking in the sun. And it's here that the last known image of them alive was taken. A tourist, just trying to get a picture of the scenery, unknowingly captured the two girls in the background, walking side by side on the sand. It's a haunting photograph. Two friends, carefree and alive, frozen in a moment just hours before they would vanish forever. As the afternoon wore on, They met up with other friends at a local bar. Time slipped away, like it always does on vacation. The 4 p.m. deadline came and went. By the time they made their way back to the meeting spot, the lancha was gone. Their ride back to Serrambi had left without them. Stranded in Maricape as the sun started to set, a feeling of unease crept in. According to case files, the girls used a public payphone to make a collect call to their friend Tiago back at the beach house in Serrambi. They explained their situation, hoping he could figure out a way to get them. The details of this call are murky, but the result was clear. No immediate help was coming from their friends. Facing a long walk back in the dark, they made a fateful decision. They walked toward the main road on the outskirts of Porto de Galinhas, a bigger, busier town nearby. Their plan, born from desperation, and maybe that feeling of invincibility that all teenagers have, was to hitchhike back to Serrambi. Witness accounts from this point are fragmented. The girls were reportedly seen by an acquaintance who gave them a short lift into the center of Porto de Galinhas, dropping them in a more populated, well-lit area. From there, they bought water and cigarettes at a bakery. They were alone again, but in a place that probably felt a little safer. But they still had to get back to Serrambi. Standing by the side of the road, they started trying to flag down a ride. Several people later reported seeing two girls matching their description asking for a lift. It was at this moment that a vehicle stopped. A white Volkswagen van, known in Brazil as a Kombi, pulled over. Witnesses would later say they saw the two girls get inside. The Kombi then drove off in the direction of Serrambi. It was the last time anyone could definitively say they saw Tarsila Gusmao and Maria Eduarda and Tarsila alive. Back at the beach house in Serrambi, the party was still going, but a sense of concern was starting to set in. The friends who'd made it back on the boat knew the girls were stranded, but they probably just assumed Tarsila and Maria Eduarda would find their own way back. It was a holiday. Plans were loose. But as the hours ticked by and the night got deeper with no sign of them, that casual assumption curdled into real fear. The next day, Sunday, May 4th, the weekend was winding down. People were packing up to head back to Recife, but two of them were still missing. Panic started to take hold. Tiago, the host, was now getting frantic calls from the girls' parents. They'd expected their daughters home, and when they didn't show, they started the heart-stopping work of trying to track them down. They called Tiago, who could only tell them what happened the day before. The boat trip, the missed return, the phone call. He didn't know where they were. Nobody did. On Monday, May 5th, with the girls still gone, the family's dread became a nightmare. Tarsila's father, Jose Vieira de Mello, a local merchant, went to the area himself. He went to the police station in Apajica to file a missing persons report. He and Maria Eduarda's family began their own desperate search, canvassing the area, asking anyone and everyone if they had seen two teenage girls. The initial police response, however, was tragically slow. The families felt the authorities weren't taking the disappearance seriously. To the police, it was just two girls who went to a party and didn't come home. Maybe they ran off with boyfriends or were just extending their holiday. The urgency the families felt was not matched by local law enforcement. For them, it seemed there was no cause for alarm. And that slow start, it would be the first in a long line of critical failures in this case. The first 48 hours are the most crucial in any missing persons investigation. It's when evidence is freshest, memories are sharpest, and the chances of finding someone alive are highest. For Tarsila and Maria Eduarda, that window was slamming shut, and the police seemed content to just watch. The disappearance was first treated as a potential kidnapping, but when hours turned into days with no ransom demand, that theory faded. The families were left in an agonizing limbo, clinging to hope while their minds raced with the worst possible scenarios. The paradise of Serrambi had revealed its dark side. The sun still shone, but for two families, the world had gone cold. For 10 agonizing days, the families of Tarsila and Maria Eduarda lived in a state of suspended horror. Hope is a stubborn thing, but it was fraying with every passing day. The official police search was sluggish, completely lacking the urgency the situation demanded. Frustrated and feeling powerless, Tarsila's father, Jose Vieira, refused to just sit and wait. He organized his own search parties, getting friends and locals who knew the area to help. He was a man driven by one desperate mission: find his daughter. He and his friends, many from his motocross club, scoured the vast, dense sugarcane fields that cover the landscape of rural Apogika. It was an almost impossible task. The fields stretched for miles, a sea of green stalks that can easily hide anything or anyone. On May 13th, 2003, 10 days after the girls disappeared, the search came to a devastating end. Jose Vieira and a friend were on a motorcycle, riding down the dirt tracks of Canaville, a sugarcane plantation in the district of Camela. His friend, who was riding ahead, suddenly stopped. He'd seen something. Jose walked over, and his world fell apart. There, discarded among the sugarcane stalks, were the bodies of two young women. What he found was a scene of unimaginable brutality. The girls' bodies were in an advanced state of decomposition, proof of how long they had been lying there undiscovered, under the hot Pernambuco sun. Their condition made visual identification almost impossible. But Jose Vieira recognized his daughter, Tarsila, by a bracelet on her wrist, a gift he had given her. Her dental braces also helped confirm it was her. The forensic examiner who arrived on the scene later described the shock of the discovery, questioning what a human being is capable of. The violence inflicted on them was extreme. The autopsies would later reveal the full horror of their final moments. Both had been sexually assaulted. Their bikini bottoms were pulled down, and they had been shot multiple times. Their young lives ended with cold, calculated cruelty. The discovery of the bodies transformed the case from a missing persons investigation into a double homicide. The media frenzy, which had been building for days, exploded. The Caso Serrambi, as it became known, was front-page news across Brazil. The story had it all. Beautiful young victims from well-to-do families, a glamorous beach setting, and a murder of shocking brutality. Everyone wanted to know what happened to Tarsila and Maria Eduarda. But as the official investigation finally kicked into high gear, it was already starting from a deeply compromised position. The crime scene itself, the place where the killers had left the girls, was the most critical source of evidence. And it hadn't been discovered by the police, but by the victim's father. In the moments that followed, a flood of people, family, friends, onlookers, descended on the area. The scene was never properly sealed, a cardinal sin in any forensic investigation. Evidence was trampled, contaminated, and potentially lost forever before it could even be collected. The investigation had begun, but it was already deeply and perhaps irrevocably flawed. Some mysteries are hard to solve because the killer is a genius. Others are hard to solve because the investigation was a failure. The Serrambi case is a haunting example of the latter. From the moment the girls' bodies were found, the police work was a cascade of errors and contradictions that would ultimately make justice impossible. Instead of a clear path to the truth, the investigation created a tangled mess of doubt, fueling accusations of incompetence and, even worse, a deliberate cover-up. Right from the start, the investigation was a disaster, and it began with the crime scenes. There were two of them: the Kombi van, where the abduction likely happened, and the sugarcane field. Neither was properly preserved. The Canavio was trampled by dozens of people before a forensic team could do a thorough sweep. Who knows what fibers, footprints, or other trace evidence were destroyed in that initial chaos. The investigation was initially led by the local civil police, but their methods quickly came under fire. Key witnesses would later claim they were pressured into giving specific testimonies. The chain of custody for crucial items was broken, making it easy for defense attorneys to later argue that evidence had been planted. The whole foundation of the case was built on shifting sand. The situation got so controversial that the case was eventually handed over to the federal police, a higher and supposedly more impartial authority. But even they would end up reaching the same contested conclusions, building their case on the same shaky evidence. Almost immediately, the police zeroed in on two local guys, the brothers Marcelo and Walfrido Lira. They weren't wealthy or powerful. They were Kombeiros, local men who operated a Kombi van as a shared taxi. Suspicion fell on them based on witness testimony that claimed Tarsila and Maria Eduarda got into a white Kombi the night they vanished. One witness in particular, a woman named Regivania da Silva, gave a description that led police to the Lira brothers. She described a white Kombi with a distinctive green bumper, a vehicle that matched the one owned by Marcelo Lira. Based on her account, police sketch artists created composite drawings, and soon after, the Lira brothers were named the primary suspects. On May 18, 2003, just 5 days after bodies were found, Marcelo and Walfredo Lira were arrested. From the moment they were arrested, both brothers fiercely proclaimed their innocence. They insisted they'd never even seen the girls. They said they had alibis, they were at home with their families, but the police were convinced they had their men. The investigation now shifted from finding the killers to proving the Lira brothers were guilty. That subtle change would have devastating consequences for the pursuit of justice. Now, to make the charges stick, prosecutors needed an ironclad case. What they presented, though, was full of holes. It was a collection of circumstantial items and forensic findings that started to fall apart under scrutiny. The prosecution pointed to several key pieces of evidence found in Marcelo Lira's Kombi. This included strands of hair said to match Maria Eduarda's, candy wrappers supposedly bought by the girls, and a disposable razor. However, the defense attorneys for the Lira brothers tore each piece of evidence apart. They argued the hair strands weren't matched through DNA, but through less reliable microscopic comparison. The candy wrappers were from a common brand you could buy anywhere. Most damningly, they argued these items could have been easily planted in the Kombi, which had been in police custody and wasn't properly sealed. Marcelo Lira himself would later state in an interview that the evidence against him was planted. A disposable razor found near the bodies was presented as a link to Marcelo, but the defense showed it was from a different manufacturing lot than the razors in his home. An eyeglass found in the Kombi was claimed to be one of the victims, but it was later revealed it belonged to a previous passenger. Every piece of physical evidence was met with a plausible explanation, a contradiction, or a strong argument for evidence tampering. The case against the Kombeiros was looking less like a slam dunk and more like a frame-up. If the physical evidence was weak, the case rested almost entirely on the eyewitnesses. And this is where the investigation truly crumbled. The key witnesses who had identified the Lira brothers or their Kombi began to change their stories. The star witness, Regivania, whose testimony was the basis of the arrests, later gave conflicting accounts. The defense argued that her vantage point and the poor lighting made a positive ID impossible. She claimed to see a specific detail on a suspect's face from a distance at night, in a matter of seconds, a claim that stretched belief. Other witnesses recanted their testimonies completely, claiming they'd been coerced or intimidated by the police into identifying the brothers. A 2024 documentary revealed that one key witness had received gifts from police officers right after giving an incriminating statement, raising serious questions about whether their testimony had been bought. This all supported the defense's narrative. The police, under immense pressure to solve the crime, had zeroed in on two convenient suspects and then manipulated the evidence to fit their theory. They weren't following the evidence. They were making the evidence point to the suspects they already had. The entire police investigation was now under a dark cloud of suspicion. The case against the Kombeiros, which the state insisted was definitive, looked to many like a house of cards. After 7 long years of legal battles and public debate, the fate of the Lira brothers was finally going to be decided. In September 2010, Marcelo and Walfredo Lira, who had already spent years in prison, were brought before a jury in Apajica, the very town where the crimes happened. The trial was a media circus, one of the most anticipated in the state's history. The prosecution presented their case. The Kombeiros were predators who had abducted, assaulted, and murdered the 2 girls. They laid out their evidence, the hair, the candy wrappers, the witness statements, and painted the brothers as cold-blooded killers. The defense, led by lawyer Jorge Wellington, responded with a scathing critique of the entire investigation. They argued there wasn't a single piece of irrefutable, scientific proof linking their clients to crime. They highlighted the inconsistent witness testimonies, questioned the forensic evidence, and hammered home their central theme. The Lira brothers were scapegoats. They were poor, uneducated men chosen to take the fall for a crime likely committed by someone with more power. Interestingly, The prosecution had asked to move the trial from Apojika to the capital, Recife, arguing that the Lira brothers could intimidate a local jury. The court denied the request. The jury of 7 local citizens listened to 5 grueling days of arguments, weighed the dubious evidence, and considered the possibility of botched investigation. In the early morning hours of September 4th, 2010, they delivered their verdict. By a narrow vote of 4-3, the jury found Marcelo and Walfredo Lira not guilty. When the verdict came back, it was a bombshell. The girls' families were devastated. For them, it was the ultimate failure of justice. Tarsila's family's lawyer said he felt a deep sense of impunity, stating that the guilty would go unpunished. The prosecution was stunned. How could a jury ignore what 3 separate police inquiries had all concluded? But for the defense and many others, the verdict was a rejection of flawed and biased police investigation. Marcelo and Walfredo Lira walked free, but the cloud of suspicion would never fully leave them. Their lives were forever changed, and the acquittal left a gaping hole at the heart of the case. If the Kombeiros didn't do it, then who did? The trial, meant to provide closure, had only deepened the mystery. With the acquittal of the Lira brothers, the official investigation hit a brick wall. But the end of the court case wasn't the end of the story. In the vacuum left by the verdict, alternative theories that had long been whispered grew louder. These theories pointed away from the Kombeiros and toward a much more disturbing possibility: that the Real killers were protected by power, wealth, and influence. The most persistent theory revolves around the party scene the victims were part of. The story that's been whispered for 2 decades is that the girls didn't die at the hands of strangers, but at a private party attended by playboys, the sons of wealthy and influential families from Recife. One version suggests that Maria Eduarda may have suffered an overdose at a gathering, and Tarsila was killed to silence her and prevent a scandal. This theory gained traction because of some unsettling details. A neighbor of the beach house reportedly told police she heard gunshots and a girl screaming on the morning of May 4th, the day after the disappearance. But this lead was allegedly never pursued. Furthermore, in a shocking lapse, the house where the girls were staying was only forensically examined 2 years after the crime. By then, the owner had already replaced the flooring, making any potential evidence collection impossible. Why weren't these leads aggressively followed? Why was the focus so intensely on the Kombeiros from the very beginning? Critics argue that the Kombeiros were the perfect scapegoats. They were poor or lacked social power and had a minor criminal history that made them easy targets. Focusing on them conveniently shifted the spotlight away from any scrutiny of the wealthy teenagers at the party and their powerful families. This narrative alleges a massive cover-up orchestrated to protect the children of the elite at the expense of 2 working-class men and, ultimately, at the expense of the truth. The name of Tiago Brennan, a controversial figure from a wealthy Pernambuco family, who years later became infamous for other violent crimes, has also been linked to the case in media speculation. These connections, however, remain unproven, and he was never an official suspect. These theories, true or not, highlight the deep-seated class divisions and distrust in the justice system that exists in Brazil. The Serrambi case became a symbol of a 2-tiered system, where the poor are convenient suspects and the rich are untouchable. The investigation wasn't just flawed. Many believe it was intentionally derailed. The Serrambi case is a chilling reminder that some questions never get answered. The pursuit of justice can be a winding, frustrating road that sometimes leads nowhere. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe the investigation was simply incompetent, or was there a deliberate cover-up to protect powerful people? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you find value in these deep dives into unsolved mysteries, please consider subscribing for more stories that deserve to be told. In May 2023, something happened that sealed this case in mystery forever. The 20-year statute of limitations expired. Even if new evidence were to surface tomorrow, even if a killer were confess, no one can ever be prosecuted for the murders of Tarsila Gusmao and Maria Eduarda Dauerdo. The case is legally and permanently closed. For the families, there is no closure, only the permanent ache of loss and the sting of impunity. Tarsila's mother moved to the United States to escape the painful memories. Maria Eduarda's father passed away in 2012, never seeing justice for his daughter. The Lira brothers, though acquitted, will forever be linked to the crime. Marcelo Lira is now a small business owner, while his brother Walfredo was later imprisoned for an unrelated, older crime. The unsolved murders of Tarsila and Maria Eduarda have left an indelible scar on Pernambuco. It's a story of systemic failure, of a justice system that failed the victims, failed the accused, and failed the society it's meant to serve. 2 young women are gone, their future stolen, and the haunting question of who was truly responsible and why they were never caught echoes through the years, a grim testament to a mystery that will now never be solved.